Welcome back to Cosmetics Anonymous. This is a DIY for an easy tube top for summer. So let's get it poppin'. So for step one, you are going to be drafting your pattern. This is going to be really easy. You're just going to choose your favorite tube top. This is one that I got at Marshall's. And I have folded it in half, and I'm going to trace that half onto the paper. Keep in mind that you don't really have to fold it in half because it is a tube top. Your front and your back are literally the exact same shape. If you want to just draw a square onto your paper, you can, and just modify it so it looks more like a tube top rather than just a boxy old square. But because you're using a 4-way knit fabric or a 4-way stretch fabric, it doesn't matter because it's going to end up conforming to your body. So as you see, I've actually drawn my first line longer than the actual top itself, and that is the center point of where the two seams meet. So the top is folded in a way where the center seam, the side seams are in the center of the paper right now, and we're only going to get half of the front of the pattern. So I'm basing my shirt off of half of one panel of the pattern rather than the whole entire front part because I'm going to be folding my fabric. It might sound complicated if you're a noob, but if you're not a noob, then you understand what I'm trying to say. So as you see here, I have my ruler on an angle because the top part of your tube top, where it would surround your boobs, it needs to be a little wider than the waist. So it's going to go from large to small or whatever. So now I am just drawing a slightly arched line that is going to peak at the top, and then it's going to go sort of on a slope to where it would be under your armpit. So it's not a perfectly straight line, it is curved and it's going to shape on the body. So now I'm just cutting out my pattern, and this pattern is going to work for the front and the back of the shirt, so you only need one piece of pattern paper. I've taken my tape measure and I have measured the point underneath my armpit, so where the top would stop, and I've also measured the circumference of my wrist and the top of my arm where the sleeves are going to sit. So now I'm taking my meter stick and I'm drawing out the line for the circumference of my arm. I believe it was 12, and you want to give obviously wiggle room. I then find the middle point of the 12-inch line, which is obviously 6. Okay, and I'm just going to mark the center because I have to also draw the line for the circumference of my wrist, and then the top line and the bottom line have to meet in the middle. So the sleeve length itself, I believe, was 18 inches. So I'm going to find 18 inches on my ruler, or 17 inches, whatever it is. I'm going to make a mark. Then I'm also going to draw out the line for the circumference of my wrist. The center point of the wrist needs to meet up with the center point of the circumference of the top of the arm. So the center point was 3.5, and the top of the arm, the center point was 6. And then I'm going to take the meter stick and I'm going to join the top line and the bottom line to complete the pattern for the sleeve. So you're going to get like a trapezoid shape. This line is going to be 18 inches from top to bottom. So I didn't add seam allowance when I was doing the actual pattern itself. So I made a note on each side of the fabric that I need to add seam allowance to the fabric itself. The same goes for the shirt part of it. I didn't add seam allowance to any of the 4 sides, so I have to add seam allowance to that as well. So here we have our 4-way stretch fabric. This is actually swimsuit material, so if you want to wear this top in the pool, you can. I purchased 1 meter of fabric, and so right now what I'm doing is folding just enough to cut the pattern out. You don't want to fold your fabric in half and cut because then you waste a lot of space. So I've just folded in one side of the fabric, and it's not even folded like a quarter of the way, I don't think. I actually ended up folding the fabric in a little bit more because I forgot about the sleeve. So right now I'm pinning the pattern to the actual fabric, and you want to make sure that you have right sides together. So your fabric is folded with the right sides, so the side you would wear the shirt on, those 2 pieces are facing each other when it's folded, and I'm pinning the sleeve directly onto the fabric. It doesn't need to be on the fold because you need 2 pieces. You need one for the left and one for the right. So I'm pinning it far enough from the top of the fabric so that I have space to add my seam allowance, and as well as far enough from the sides of the fabric. Seam allowance is based on how much you want to give yourself for wiggle room. So usually I believe seam allowance is 5/8. I could be wrong. It's whatever you want it to be, okay? If you need a whole damn inch, girl, take an inch, okay? So now I'm going to pin the tube top itself onto the fabric. Obviously, it has to be pinned far enough down so that there's space for seam allowance to be added again. So I'm just actually lining up the edge of the paper to the fold of the fabric. It needs to be spot on, okay? I cannot stress this enough. So because the shirt is striped, I am kind of using the stripes as a guide, and I'm also adding some length to the tube top just because I also not only want it to be long, but I also need my seam allowance added onto the fabric because I didn't put it on the pattern itself. So this is the sleeve. I'm adding seam allowance to all 4 sides of the sleeve. So where it's going to be stitched together, where it's going to be turned under at the wrist, and where it's going to be turned under at the top of the arm as well. I'm so used to cutting stuff on a fold that I could have made this much more simple for myself had I not drawn the pattern as half of the front and the back. If I drew out the full front of that pattern, I would have been able to just fold the fabric, not cut it on the fold, and get both of my pattern pieces cut out at the same time. But because of my negligence I ended up with this complication. So basically what I'm doing now is repinning that first cutout of just the shirt part onto the fabric, and I am going to cut out the now back of the shirt. So I don't have to do this for the sleeves, I just have to do it for the tube top itself. And you want right sides together. We know this is the right side because it has the 3D side. This side's flat. So you actually want to do your seam first. So because it's striped, I'm using this as a guideline. I'm using the color itself as a guideline, the orange. And usually you want to use pins and tack it down, but I'm not going to bother with that. Once you hem the bottom, you can also hem the top. So then again, put your foot down and oh, I have the wrong, it's okay. So now you want to do right sides together. Okay. And so this is the top of the sleeve where your arm will sit in. So that is a full sleeve, and you're just going to cut the excess out of the inside. Keep in mind, when you're sewing, it's always better to have an iron on hand. Usually when you cut out the insides, you want to flatten them with your iron afterwards. So this is one finished sleeve. Gotta pull it inside out, or right side in. Okay. And it's just a cuff sleeve, so it'll attach right here. It's the inside. So it'll be like that, okay? So on the last sleeve, I did a zigzag stitch, so I didn't need to go back against it. This time I did a straight stitch on this sleeve. So my stitch is pretty flawless actually. So I've actually raised my presser foot, and I put it back. I've flipped the fabric, and I'm gonna put it back down and sew back against the straight line again. Ooh, girl. Here we have our front and our back. Okay, so I've tacked this side, and we're going to start stitching. So I'm using a zigzag stitch. just because I have a 4-way knit here, so because I have a 4-way stretch fabric, it's easier if I do a zigzag. It's going to hold it into place. So you guys can see what's going on here. We have a zigzag stitch. And so this is the side of the top. But now we're going to open it up. And we're going to hem the top part and the bottom. So I've cut the excess out, and now this is when a iron would come in super handy. I'm just gonna move that out the way for a moment. Okay, and last but not least, we've got to sew this side shut. So you have your tube top. Obviously you would have cut out all of the excess fabric and stuff. And now you're going to attach your sleeve. So you want to make sure you have the top of the top. You know this is the top because there's a curve. Okay, whereas the bottom has no curve at all. You want to make sure it's on the proper side. You want to take one of your sleeves. You want to match it up right seam to seam, and then you just want to do a very quick stitch. So we're going to put the presser foot down, secure it, and then do a quick little stitch. Okay, and now it's attached. And I mean, if you want to do one sleeve, you can, but I'm doing two. Same thing follows, seam to seam. You hear Bellamy? Bellamy's like, Mom, I need more milk. 2 seconds, baby girl. So you want to cut off any excess threads. I'm coming, Mama. And when you're done, you'll have something that looks like this. I love you all so much, and I'll definitely see you in the next one.
Fuck a palm reading nigga.